Today we're going to have a really cool presentation, or interview rather, with Pat Redding Scanlon and Monica Barraclough.
Hello.
Say hi, Pat.
Hello.
And they've just worked on a story together called No Titans of Our Own, and it's really cool. It's a prose story with beautiful illustrations, and I think it's really nice to talk about how it fits very well into the Deep Signal kind of milieu, where it's sort of it's a Pat's artistic style is coming from more like a comic illustration stylized background, but merging with this prose story, so it's very kind of cool and fresh looking for an illustrated speculative type story. So we'll hear more about that from her, and then also we'll just get the whole background of the story. My first question was, how do you guys know each other?
Do you want to start, Monica?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, we met through work. So I work with Pat's husband at CTA Architects, and there was a company event that we ended up meeting at two company events, right? The picnic originally, and then I think we really started talking at the wedding.
And our children, yeah, but the Kaylee had a recent birthday party, and she gave my daughter Valentine like a bag of Minecraft stuff. And then I focused on you some more, and then at the wedding we were sitting next to each other and we just started talking, and I was really thinking about Deep Signal, and then you told me that you were a writer, and I asked, I was impressed with you, and I knew it had to be good, so that sent me 3 or 4 pieces.
3, yeah, I think I sent you 3.
Right, and would you like to say the names of them?
Yeah, so there's No Titans But Our Own, which ended up being picked. There was a Clash versus the 9 to 5, which was a superhero story, and I'm not sure what the third one was.
I enjoyed that one a lot.
Oh, I think the third was probably The Angels of Kothos, which is another science fiction one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and you guys were asking my opinion on it, which one, and I was just immediately drawn to the Titan story. I think because of it's really strong because it's about a family.
Yep.
And
right.
That's where the strength of the story is. It's in this background of sort of this we call it dystopian kind of future, but it's actually a story about family, which makes it even more beautiful. And that's why I was compelled to ask you to work on that.
You have a whole bunch of stories that fit into that same world with those characters, don't you, Monica?
I do. I have several. So Moira, one of the characters in the story, actually stems from a novel draft, and Samson was in there as well. So one of the things that happened to me is I really wanted Moira to kind of get a happy ending at some point, and most of the novel draft, she did not have too much happiness going on. So I was like, I'm going to write a story where she actually has something nice happen. So that's what prompted the whole thing.
A lot of authors set up their stories specifically to torture characters.
Yeah, that's what I had done originally, and then I felt really bad, so I thought I'd give her something nice for a change.
There's some torture in there.
Yeah, there is. That's a good day for her.
It's interesting.
Some bad meals. There's some
exactly.
Yeah.
You got me thinking about the various stories that are in the book, Deep Signal. And they're not all pessimistic. It's actually quite common if you read the anthologies that they all sort of fall into one kind of category that's dark or future dystopian, anarchy kind of stuff. But there's actually some stories with some hope in there.
Well, I kind of feel like that's key to dystopian fiction, quite frankly. Like, dystopia is one thing, but how you survive it, right? And how you kind of like find your own way through it is the interesting part to me.
Yes. Yeah, it's I think I'm not sure what readers are looking for when they're going to open up a book and read that story. They'll probably scan it first, right? They're going to open up the book and they're going to see the illustrations, and they might think it's like maybe an action story, but no, it's not really. It is, but it isn't. It's a family story, and it's a little bit horrific. Yes, it's a little bit horrific, and but in the heart of the story is very strong. So I think they'll come away from that. Actually, that's what I think they carry with them. I don't want to spoil the story too much, but actually, it would be really nice if you could read your excerpt. We chose an excerpt for And so it'd be really nice. So we'll be very quiet, so make sure that the video focuses on you while you read.
All right. Ready? Dream a little dream of me. Nike's voice sang through the intercom. She often burst into song when she was working late in the lab, louder when it was just Samson and her. Damn good voice, too. The engineers likely hadn't thought of her vocal range when they'd stuck her DNA together. It might have been nothing more than a byproduct of her enhanced lung capacity. Either way, Moira loved listening to her sing. The last bite of soy steak was as flavorless as the first, but it was food, and it was, well, not plentiful. Few things were these days, but it was part of her salary, so at least the supply was steady. Moira carried her plate over to the sink. As she reached for the faucet, a flickering dot of red caught her eye. She whipped her head to the left, quickly tracing the targeting beam to its origin, the small porthole in the front door. Shit. The light blinked twice, quick as a heartbeat, and the door disintegrated, a large oval hole left in its center. The remaining metal glowed orange and white, frayed edges curling out like a jagged flower. Moira got her wits together just enough to slam her hand against the intercom off switch and kick the pantry door closed before the soundless, bone-rattling pulse of a stun-and scan filled the room, setting Moira's teeth on edge. Dr. Moira Shanti, you are in possession of Unigen bioproperty. Your residence's airlock has been breached. We have provided you with a temporary air shield. You have 2 minutes to get into your gear and step outside with the property you have stolen. If at that time you have not complied, we will, in accordance with Section 18 of the Survival Enforcement Codex, remove the air shield and reclaim our property by any means necessary. Moira stood, rooted to the spot while her brain scrambled for options. She had only two. Stay inside and wait for the Unigen army to drag her out, or go outside and surrender. Either way, she had to stall long enough for Nike and Samson to make a break for it. They'd built the lab with a backdoor for a reason, and now that reason was outside, with guns.
Cool. Cool. Very nice. You should do that for professionals.
Perhaps I will.
Thanks.
Some of the people we've been talking about actually trying to do some podcasts, just as like the audio podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
and converting some of these videos into audio podcasts, and then actually having audio podcasts themselves, maybe as like bonus material, sort of something. So we'll see what happens in the future. Right now, we just want to get the book out there, put it on the Kickstarter, and have people really like excited from things like this, because I think they're going to really be surprised by how good it is. And if you just hear it, like just in the writing, sort of like the I was going to say passion, I guess, for it. You know, like just hearing the little lilts in your voice when you're reading the story. It gives a nice accent to the pacing.
Why, thank you.
So, Pat, when you started illustrating this, what was the first thing you did? You started doing some kind of mood board or something.
Oh yeah, I made a Pinterest board. I think I might have started sketching first. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I do like I like to do Pinterest boards, and I think I was initially thinking, how would Samson look, and how would the women look, and what are they wearing, and what does their basement lab look like? And then I got into, well, what sort of guns are they? And then I got hung up on, making them look, what sort of realistic guns. And then I thought, well, this is a bit in the future. So I ended up having something a bit smaller and based on real guns, but not, I'm not super hung up on every detail, making them realistic, a little bit futuristic. I did attach to the notes. I did do that snippety screenshot of the Pinterest board if you want to show it. And what is Samson? They're breeding him to get ready for a future, which is something I think all parents think about. And they're very specifically better at it probably than we are. But he has, I don't want to give away too much, but he has scales. So I have pictures of scales and tentacles and things like that on my Pinterest board. But then also, women in spacesuits and helmets and boots and all sorts of things like that. I was thinking about all that stuff. Yeah.
I love the design of all of it, all the way that you sketched everything, and the guns look awesome, and the helmets look great. I mean, I had, you know, an image in my head, and it's super satisfying as a writer when an artist like totally gets exactly what you were going for. It makes me so happy.
Great.
So yeah,
You got me thinking when I'm listening to the story about it's you know, people are eating soy steak, and it sounds very very pessimistic to me. And the sort of like the economics of resource scarce society in the future, and how you kind of actually design these, like the uniforms that they're wearing. Everything's kind of not overdone, right? It's not over embellished. It's like, and when I think, like, for example, like the North Korean army or something, they're not loaded up with a lot of extra straps and medals and insignias and all these extra things. They're wearing what you would wear in a world that's a little bit less
Resource deprived. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
made out of insects and Soylent Green burgers.
So it's. I think, Monica, you mentioned that you're. Can we talk about this? That you're a vegetarian.
Yes.
And you threw in that soy steak comment.
Some of them are better than others.
Well, how can a vegetarian write such a horrific story where people are being really? I mean, it's. I'm not going to give it away too much. There's a lot of bloodletting going on at one point.
Yes.
I didn't
well,
think
I grew up a huge horror buff, you know. I mean, I think that's part of it. I was also raised on the original Grimm fairy tales, which are extremely violent.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but a great example is in the original version in Cinderella, the stepsisters, they cut their feet to fit into the shoe. Like they slice off a heel, they cut off the toes. Like, it's pretty brutal. You know, and
I want to draw that.
There's quite a few things like that. There's heart eating going on in Snow White. You know, all kinds of things. So I was raised on that. I started watching horror movies probably a little too young. But I like body horror. And I guess one of my motivations for writing really was, as a girl, one of the things I found so frustrating about these fairy tales, and about most stories, is that when there were women characters or girl characters, they were reactionary, right? So things happen to them. And they're a plot element, but they're not usually driving the plot. Even in the fairy tales, where the princess, in theory, is the center of the story, generally the princess is running from something or trying to escape something or being rescued, and she's not really making things happen. So there's a handful of stories where there was kind of a protagonist, proactive female character, and that's what I want to see more of. Like, I remember... I'm not sure what the English title is. I think, is it The Snow Queen? There was one of those, and The Seven Ravens. Those were two stories I can think of where the girl actually was a proactive protagonist. So I like stories like that, and I was determined at some point, you know, to write more stories where the girl got to be the hero. So
yeah, there's sort of a in like old ballads, and there are quite a few. Industrial Revolution came along. Something happened to women's rights. Now, what's so cool about the story is that you're sort of just assuming, without even like pushing it on anyone, that this is a kind of a different kind of family. And that was part of what drew me to the story too, honestly. And it's relevant, I guess, but it's also it's seamless. It's not like a political thing in the story. People have to read it to really pick up the sense of what they're all about, this little family, and what it means to be a family, even in this environment that you're describing. So I think it's compelling from that point of view. And I did want to mention that to the watchers, The Deep Citadel is not a horror book. In fact, when I put out the call for stories and art that I specifically said two things. It's not a fantasy book.
Mm-hmm.
There's no elves and dwarves. That's because I personally don't want to edit that kind of stuff right now. But also, it's not a splatter punk horror kind of genre thing either, and it's not even science fiction. People keep thinking it's a science fiction book, but it's actually very open. We have stories of all kinds, and this one fits right in. Sort of actually crosses over into many areas. Your story. We have stories that are psychological more than anything else, or stories that are really specifically futuristic. And we have poetry. We have a poem as well, that's about dreams. So it's this whole big. It's really like a love letter to storytelling. That's what Deep Signal is about, and that's why I think it's drawn so much good talent into the book, because people see who's involved and they see the samples and everything that everyone is putting out. It's like the feeling is very, very warm, and I think that's what's going to really, people are going to feel this passion, and it will attract this book. I'm crossing my fingers.
What gave you the idea to do it, Eric?
Oh, well, I just submitted one of my own story that's actually going to be in the book, and it's a story called Noise, and it's about rock and roll and magic and technology, sort of a strange combination. I'll throw up some images from it, but I sent it to this particularly well-known anthology magazine that's been around for almost 40 years. And I got a very strange rejection letter from them, where it's basically, they said, we don't even know if you've submitted the story or not, or if we've accepted your story. If it's been published in the magazine, then we've accepted it. I was just like, this is outrageous. And, I was walking around France, and I got this email from them as I was walking at Angoulême Comics Festival. And I was surrounded by completely amazing writers and artists. What the hell? I'm going to start my own book, because why not? I think for the North American market and through this Kickstarter audience, I think they're really going to see not just my story, but everyone's work. And they're going to really get excited by the quality of the work. And I wanted to make, like I said, like a book that exemplifies the best of illustrated fiction. That's the goal. That it started off as a way to self-publish myself, so I can't get a rejection letter from myself really easily. And so now it's become a much bigger idea beyond myself, beyond my story. It's become an anthology of people I really respect and like to work with. And I got to meet new people like Monica. I didn't know you before Pat introduced us. Mm-hmm. Pat, though, we should talk a little bit, Pat, about how we met.
Do you want to start it off, or shall I?
I can mention briefly when I was 15, a sophomore in high school. I was just utterly obsessed with comics. My ambition in life was to become a savage sort of Conan artist. And Pat, I wrote the Marvel, and because my school
editor of Savage Sword at the time.
Yeah,
awesome.
She was this editor, and I'd seen her name for years on the magazine, and I wrote to Pat basically, and I said, my school has a mentorship program, and I would like for you to become a mentor if possible. And she's like, cool, and I was great. Right. And then I started a story. It was called Blood on the Snow, really cliche barbarian story, and I can't remember what the story was really about, except there was blood on the snow. That's all. I just remember the title, and I had drawn about maybe 20 pages of the story, and it was really that awful. But Pat was super kind and giving me really good feedback all the way through until I got a C- in my math class, and they pulled the mentorship thing away. So I wasn't given any time to work on it, and I needed to focus on my grades, of course. So I bowed out. But Pat and I kept talking for a while after that, and so then Pat, you went off from Savage Sword of Conan and the other Conan titles. You went off to some other areas of publishing you can talk about.
Right, I worked on syndicated comic strips after that, and book publishing, and then I went into animation, and then with the magic of social media. Eric found me again. Yeah, but it's funny. No one has ever asked me to be their mentor. Never before that, nor since. And I didn't think that much about it. But I'm working on a cookbook with somebody else I used to work with now, and he said, "Well, how do you know that he didn't write to everyone at Marvel?" So I recently asked Eric, and you were the only one that said yes. And I recently asked Eric, so did you only write to me? And he said yes. So, you know, I suppose we were destined to meet in a way. And it's
I
nice.
almost met you in, I think it was Chicago. You were there at this comics festival, I think when you were with the newspaper syndicate.
No, I never went to Chicago with that. The only time I'd been to Chicago was when I was a roadie for a band, when I was fired for a couple of years then.
Pat has an awesome past.
Yeah, it's amazing. People need to really check out her website, which will flash up on the screen here in a minute. But I swear, I was looking for you when I ended up working in comics, and I was production assistant for Charles Best at Green Man Press for many years. And so I went to all the big comic shows. I was hanging out with people like Neil Gaiman.
You know more people than I do.
Yeah, but then I moved to Europe, and everything kind of crashed. Now I've been doing other work since then, but I'm getting back into it, and this is really what I want to do. So I hope people can really feel my passion for this.
Yeah, I feel it.
Yeah, well, we talk like every day about this.
Back into it too.
Pat is still my mentor, and she's also my counselor.
That goes both ways, though.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out like interviewing video software together and puzzling through stuff sometimes, and trying to make this stuff work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's been amazing, you know. Gosh, 30 years ago. How many years ago was that? When you were at Marvel Comics.
Well, it was at Marvel from 84, 85 until the fall of 1988. So yeah.
And you worked with some of the people that are in Deep Signal. You managed talent such as Stephen Hickman, who did some covers for Savage Sword, Michael Kluda.
Right, and Michael Kluda is as many covers of Conan the King as he wanted to do. I met Elaine Lee at the time because she used to hang out with Mike Kluda. They were doing Starstruck then, and she would come in our office. And then I worked for Larry Hama, who was a really great person to learn about comics from and to work for. Great guy, and I learned so much. But he would try to find ways to create projects that talented people to work on, and working for Larry, his comics were the most well, we did all the non-superhero stuff, like Funny Animals, rock and roll, action adventure, things like that. And I think he might have come up with this comic. He wanted me to write it, but I wasn't really a writer at all. And so then Elaine Lee wrote it. And I think it was a mini series, and it was called Steeltown Rockers. And so and then I was like, well, why can't I draw that one? Mm-hmm. But then I left, and I was working at the Syndicate and book publishing company, and I think Gary Hallgren ended up drawing it.
And you're working with Elaine in Deep Signal on a story too, a comic story, which is really cool, called Juice.
Right.
And I can show some of that as well to the audience, and I think they're going to be excited.
Yeah, and that's that also has a female main character. Mm-hmm. She's a protagonist rather than
reactive.
Not reactive. Yeah, I mean react, but she does everything.
Cool.
A lot of action too.
Yeah.
And she has got wheels for legs.
Well, she, before the grid goes down, she had been, you know, a surgeon and a maker. So in the war, she had had some body parts shot off. So she can create and attach whatever she needs depending on the action. So yeah, really fun to draw. And
you guys
again,
are grim. You're a little.
No, it's not grim at all. It's about survival.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, this was
Very
my
optimistic.
my main story is this noise story that's in Deep Signal, and it's also, I'm not very nice to my characters either. Some sort of psychological thing that writers have, I guess. Right. So, Monica, what do you have coming up? Are you still writing? You're writing your book series right now, yeah?
Yeah, well, no, I'm writing. I write mainly short stories. I do always have some kind of novel draft in the back of my head, but short stories, flash fiction, I really enjoy. Those are super short stories, under 1,500 words.
Nice.
So I've written quite a few of those.
For you, actually, if you got time for it, for some other artwork coming up, that hopefully we have a special famous person who just last night expressed interest in joining Deep Signal at the last second.
Oh, excellent.
I'll tell you about it after the interview because I don't want to just say it and then it'll not happen. But it's really cool.
Nice.
exciting.
But I will need some flash fiction, so that would be really
cool. Awesome. Yeah, I'm always available for that. I've learned that basically what I love a challenge, right? And what's great about flash fiction is you're so restricted that you're kind of forced to boil the story down to its essence and to really go, okay, what point do I want to get across? I only have so many words.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lower limit. I did try microfiction at one point, which is a nightmare.
Yeah.
250 words or less. You can't do much with that. But 1,500 is pretty good. And my sweet spot is usually around 3,000 to 4,000. That's where I feel most at home, which is what No Titans of Our Own is. So
right, it's perfect. Really.
Thank you.
To sit down, have a glass of cup of coffee or tea, and just sit down and look at this beautifully illustrated, well-written story. It's very satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just saying that because I'm the editor of the book. as a lover of the genre, of the stories. We're about to run out of time, so I'm gonna say thank you very, very much.
And thank you to you both. This is awesome.
I think when you see everything and later on, people are gonna get really excited when they have all the flashy graphics and stuff flying around. It'll be much more fun too. So it'll be like, we'll edit out me going and every time I roll my eyes. So, all right.
Okay.
Monica, farewell.
Nice to talk to you.
Okay. Ciao.
Bye.
How do I hit stop? Oh.